Despite extraordinary advancements in technology and medicine, vaccine hesitancy is on the rise in many countries. Some parents refuse to vaccinate their children due to religious beliefs, pseudo-scientific notions, or just misinformation. Vaccine refusal poses a significant risk to everybody's lives, as it leaves populations vulnerable to a multitude of diseases. Even more alarming is the resurgence of diseases that were once eradicated worldwide thanks to vaccines. Rufia Aluso, a Kenyan farmer, accidentally cut his finger with a machete while working in a cornfield. His village in Kenya sits on the border with Somalia, far from urban infrastructure. The nearest hospital is hours away. Beyond mere distance, the major hurdle is financial. Factoring in travel expenses and medical fees, the cost of an outpatient visit to the hospital would amount to around $200, a significant sum for Rufia, a farmer with limited means. Today he's not entirely out of luck, because it happens to be when the Safari Doctors team is scheduled to travel here. They are volunteer physicians who carry medical equipment and have a 2-hour sea voyage to provide medical treatment and services to the people in this village. Rufia says that the hospital is too far away, and he's no money to see a doctor anyway.
Here are in need of help. The health service inaccessible to them.
Safari Doctors is a social enterprise founded in 2015 to provide medical services to people living in remote areas. Every month, they travel to 12 villages near the Somali border to provide basic healthcare services, from treating wounds to dispensing medication and administering vaccines. People in these villages are impoverished, but that's not the only reason they lack access to basic healthcare services. The threat of violence inflicted by the notorious terrorist group Al-Shabaab often deters them from venturing far from their villages. So, the Safari Doctors team frequently serves as their sole lifeline. Mothers carry their children to the roughly built makeshift clinic. The vaccines are administered to each child. This clear liquid in the syringe helps prevent various diseases and gives children a chance to grow up. According to the United Nations, every day 15,000 children under the age of 5 die from preventable diseases such as malaria, diarrhea, measles, mumps, polio, and even hepatitis. Africa has the highest mortality rate of children under 5 due to a lack of access to basic healthcare services. In a small clinic in Madagascar, this is Robertine Soa, who carried her sick toddler 5 kilometers on foot to reach the facility. On the bed next to her lies Vola Safi, who crossed the river to seek medical treatment for her youngest daughter. Both children have been diagnosed with measles, a disease of which there was a resurgence in 2019. This measles outbreak claimed an estimated 207,500 lives that year alone.
In 2018, almost 350,000 measles cases were reported, which is more than double in 2017. So we have very diverse reasons for these outbreaks, but the underlying root cause is children living in communities where vaccination with measles vaccine is insufficient, and children themselves individually who are unimmunized.
In the past, measles was a leading cause of death in young children. With the development of vaccines, the number of deaths from this disease has decreased significantly, almost disappearing altogether. Nevertheless, this menace is making a comeback. Reports from the World Health Organization indicate a significant increase in the number of measles cases in many countries. In 2019, the global number of measles cases surged to 869,770, marking the highest reported figure since 1996, with rises observed across all WHO regions. This re-emergence of measles is occurring in both impoverished and affluent countries. In poorer countries, it occurs due to limited access to vaccines. In affluent countries, though, it stems from the refusal by many people to get vaccinated. Williamsburg, Brooklyn, is home to the largest concentration of Orthodox Jews in New York City. Hebrew is the common language, featured on signs and shop fronts. The image of Jewish men wearing the long black coat or rekel on weekdays and a fedora may be considered old-fashioned in mainstream fashion contexts, but for this devout Jewish community, it's a way of life. This area is now under special medical scrutiny, following reports that 3/4 of measles cases in the city are concentrated here.
You know, we don't feel good about making so much noise in the street, and everybody should just point their finger. Look at the bad people. They bring the measles, and it's so spooky, and it's, you know...
Religious beliefs are the primary reason Williamsburg has become the epicenter of measles outbreaks. This epidemic subsided after the measles vaccine was developed 60 years ago, following Edward Jenner's innovation of the first vaccine in the late 18th century. Apart from the measles vaccine, many other vaccines have been developed over time. Initially, people were hesitant, but the effectiveness of vaccines became self-evident as they successfully prevented diseases like smallpox, polio, and tetanus. Vaccines emerged as life-saving interventions, increasingly seen as a necessity for children to improve nothing less than their chance of survival. Nonetheless, not everyone accepts or trusts them. For those who are religious and hold the value of purity, being vaccinated is regarded as introducing impurities into the body. Moreover, some people believe that certain vaccines can lead to autism in children.
Friends of mine, sister of mine told me her friends had problems, difficulties. They actually told me a story that one of their child was very, very well, he was responding normally, but once he got the vaccines, he did not respond normally.
The psychological resistance to vaccines has been spreading in this community, with flyers distributed opposing vaccination, the result of which is the rapid contagion of the measles virus in Williamsburg, a disease which had been all but eradicated, and rising levels of concern. The mayor of New York has had to declare a state of emergency, mandating the inoculation of residents. Failure to comply will cost you a $1,000 fine.
Measles is incredibly contagious. You can be in a room, if you're susceptible, you can be in a room that somebody with measles left 2 hours earlier and still get the disease. If a person with measles meets a population that's unvaccinated, about 90% of folks are going to get the disease.
Refusal of vaccines is not limited to devout Jewish communities. It's a US-wide issue. Vaccines are substances derived from deactivated pathogens that cause diseases, which can no longer harm the human body. The principle behind a vaccine is to stimulate the immune system. When a vaccine is administered, white blood cells eliminate the disease, as they normally would, and produce antibodies to combat it now and usually in the future. Consequently, when the actual infection occurs, the body recognizes the active pathogen and can respond more swiftly to manage the disease. Vaccination stands as a superior method of disease prevention compared to allowing people to become ill and then treating them. Despite vaccines preventing millions of deaths worldwide annually, the rising trend of vaccine skepticism and outright refusal is profoundly worrying. This hesitancy to get inoculated is not solely grounded in religion, but is spreading within middle-class American communities, including Babsy Spear.
God made these perfect bodies. They can heal themselves if you just allow them to do that.
Today, Babsy has an appointment with a female doctor who also rejects and doesn't believe in vaccines. This doctor advises her patients to eat wholesome food and get enough sleep as alternatives to vaccination. As a doctor, she doesn't trust vaccines because they contain chemicals like aluminium and even mercury, which she believes could be a cause of autism in children.
And they wonder why we're having problems with learning disabilities and problems with reading and studying and anger issues. I think that their brains are being affected by all of these adverse chemicals.
The fear of and refusal to get vaccinated is spreading in the United States, with its origins traceable back to the United Kingdom. Initially, the vaccine against each disease required its own dose to be given independently, until 1971. That was when Dr. Maurice Hilleman developed the MMR vaccine, merging vaccines for measles, mumps and rubella into a single inoculation, minimizing the vaccination process for children. In the 1980s and 1990s, hospitals in the UK began routinely administering the MMR vaccine. Unfortunately, the age at which it is optimal to administer the childhood MMR inoculation coincided with the age at which those children who will develop autism begin to exhibit early symptoms. What was essentially a coincidence, therefore, led some to connect the two events. In 1998, a British doctor named Andrew Wakefield published a research paper in the medical journal The Lancet, suggesting a link between the MMR vaccination and a weakened intestinal barrier. According to his theory, this could allow proteins from the intestines to travel to the brain, potentially causing autism. So, he advocated against the MMR vaccine and recommended a return to separate vaccines for each disease. This news sparked widespread panic, leading many parents in a number of countries to refuse vaccination for their children, even if it wasn't the MMR vaccine. Consequently, measles outbreaks occurred in the UK and Europe, resulting in numerous sick children and some fatalities. Andrew Wakefield's research has since been discredited, falsely linking the MMR vaccine to autism. Investigations ultimately exposed his fraudulent motives, fueled by financial gain from lawsuits against vaccine manufacturers. After being stripped of his medical license, Wakefield fled to the US, where he continued spreading misinformation. Despite efforts to counter his falsehoods, they persist, contributing to alarming increases in vaccine-preventable diseases globally. Measures like school bans on unvaccinated children and public health campaigns aiming to combat the former doctor's false claims, changing entrenched beliefs remains a formidable challenge.
If you want to see more great content from all over the world, please like the video, subscribe to our channel and hit the bell icon. Thank you.
During the World Vaccine Summit in Brussels in 2018, Jean-Claude Juncker, President of the European Commission at the time, expressed his concern that while people in certain parts of the world are dying due to a lack of access to vaccinations, elsewhere, including in some of the reputedly most advanced countries, people are risking their lives and those of others by refusing readily available and cheap vaccinations. In just a few years, the mortality rate for measles in Europe increased 6-fold. Perhaps the most concerning is Ukraine. It has the lowest vaccination rates in Europe. Ukraine is a measles hotspot on the continent, with vaccine skepticism that once led to a large outbreak from 2017 to 2019. Over 115,000 people were infected, and 41 died. Most infections were among people who were either unvaccinated or whose vaccination status was undetermined. The high numbers remain alarming, prompting the Ukrainian government to announce a ban on unvaccinated children from attending school with their vaccinated peers. This has led to protests from parents who don't, for whatever reason, believe in vaccination. Elizaveta Panchenko, a teacher and anti-vaccine protester, believes it makes no sense to use vaccines in the current situation. She argues that it's better to build up immunity. Anzelika Sobchenko, who works in logistics and is also an anti-vaccine protester, believes that if she were to get her child vaccinated, it would be her responsibility if she was harmed. She considers it very risky. Anzelika explains, without causal linkage, that the child may become disabled after the vaccine, and she would blame herself for it for the rest of her life. The desperately low vaccination rates in Ukraine have been exacerbated by the ongoing conflict. The World Health Organization has noted that Ukraine's vulnerability to contagious diseases has increased since Russia's invasion commenced in February 2022. Within the first 8 months of 2023, Ukraine documented 43 cases of measles, a sharp increase compared to the mere 11 cases reported throughout the entirety of 2022.
What we can see is if we've got a 79% increase.
Globally, the World Health Organization reported a 79% increase in measles cases in 2023, with over 130,000 deaths reported in 2022, the majority of whom were children. In the US, 35 measles cases were reported in the first 2 months of 2024, attributed to declining vaccination rates exacerbated by the anti-vaccine movement. Pandemic-related disruptions were another key factor in missed vaccinations, with 61 million fewer doses distributed nationwide between 2020 and 2022. These figures underscore the urgent need for action to combat vaccine hesitancy and to ensure equitable access to immunization to prevent further outbreaks.
And my mother is an anti-vax advocate that believes vaccines cause autism, brain damage, and do not benefit the health and safety of society, despite the fact such opinions have been debunked numerous times by the scientific community. I went my entire life without numerous vaccines against diseases such as measles, chickenpox, or even polio. However, in December 2018, I began catching up on my missed immunizations, despite my mother's disapproval.
Ethan Lindenberger recounted his own story to the United States Health Committee, which is gathering opinions and possible solutions to the measles outbreak crisis. Ethan grew up in a family who rejected vaccines, and his story shines a light on a major public health issue in the United States.
I grew up understanding my mother's beliefs that vaccines are dangerous, and she would speak openly about these views. Both online and in person, she would voice her concerns, and these beliefs were met with strong criticism. Over the course of my life, seeds of doubts were planted and questions arose because of the backlash my mother would receive. But over time, that really didn't lead anywhere.
Growing up with parental vaccine hesitancy, Ethan never received any vaccinations during his childhood. When he turned 18, he made his own decision to get vaccinated against measles, mumps, rubella, hepatitis, chickenpox, and polio. As a legal adult, his parents could no longer prevent him from doing so. Ethan now travels to other countries to share his childhood experience, emphasizing the importance of vaccination. Over the years, misinformation has spread. Many Americans have become fearful of vaccines, and Ethan is not the only victim. Many children have now grown up at risk, having never received the protection against very well understood diseases they deserve. With its rapid dissemination of information, social media has become a new tool for vaccine opponents to propagate their beliefs. In March 2019, Facebook announced new measures to combat fake news. stating that all posts related to anti-vaccination would be removed from their online community. Following suit, Pinterest and YouTube also announced similar policies. Although much of the content promoting false beliefs has been removed from the online world, actually changing people's ingrained beliefs cannot be achieved overnight.
The recent announcements by Pinterest and Facebook that they will direct users to accurate and reliable information about vaccines is very welcome and a great start. But more needs to be done, and we hope they will do more.
I think reaching out to those families and trying to educate them and trying to engage them in compassionate, non-judgmental medical care is more the answer.
From the perspective of individual rights, the decision to accept or refuse vaccines is indeed a personal choice, grounded in the right to bodily autonomy. Governments cannot impose anything on individuals without their consent. From a global perspective, though, when one person refuses vaccination, they are potentially putting the entire world at risk. Whether due to religious beliefs or scientific skepticism, if the number of vaccine refusals continues to increase, deadly diseases like measles, smallpox, diphtheria, and polio will return. The world is regressing by returning to the skepticism and hesitancy last seen when the vital and proven life-saving vaccine revolution began.